But I didn't realize this, but everyone talks about, oh, we've got 12 years till 2030 to do something about climate. If we don't do something about the climate, you know, in 12 years, man, we're in trouble. But we also have another 12-year deadline, and that is if we don't reach compliance with our air quality, the federal government is going to come in and there's going to be some serious consequences. And so, Barry, you've been involved with this. You worked on the air quality management plan. What are the state of the regulations, and what happens in 2031 if we don't reach attainment?
So I'd like to, first of all, start off by thanking Move LA for suggesting that what we need now is a Move Southern California. And I would also like to make one other suggestion, then I'll get to answering your question and do it quickly. What I've heard today from Senator De Leon, Chair Nichols, and my fellow panelists is what I think is a very good articulation of the questions and issues that have to be addressed. And Move LA has given us a broad brush proposal to start the dialogue, and someone has to put something like that on the table to generate a succinct list of issues and questions that have to be addressed. So I applaud you for this effort. As has been indicated here, and I've worked on the region's clean air plan for over 30 years. For the last 30 years, I've touched it in one way or another. There is this fundamental measure, building block in the current plan of $1 billion a year for 10 to 12 years. The plan falls apart for ozone and particulate pollution, and also for the things that we want to do with air toxics and other issues without that $1 billion. And it isn't just here in Southern California, but it's also the same for the San Joaquin Valley. So this isn't, you know, should we do this? This is legally, we must do this as the plans have been approved. And there are consequences if you don't do it, where you can lose federal funding, and the offset ratios go higher for new facilities that come into the region. And so, but that's not the real motivation from my perspective. The real motivation is what you've also heard today, and that is public health and protecting the residents of Southern California and addressing the disproportionate impacts that exist in some of our communities. That's what should be motivating us, and it's a matter of finding out by dialogue what is the best way to get there. We've been in the air pollution control arena for over 50 years, and we have a lot of lessons learned doing that. We know that one size doesn't fit all when you're talking about trucks and fleets or other industries. You have to have flexibility, and Chair Nichols mentioned that. But De Leon was correct when he said, set your goal high. Right. If you come up a little short, you're still going to be further towards your goal than you otherwise would be. And I think that's another lesson. And that when we put regulations together, we make mid-course corrections. And in fact, the proposal that was put on the table today said at 10 years, let's review. Now, maybe 10 years isn't the right way to do that, or maybe it should be 5 or so on, but the proposal does note that there would be ongoing flexibility as the program moves forward, and that's important. I've been contemplating some of these issues in detail recently, and for me, one of the things that we have to do a much better job about is planning our transition of technologies, and that's what some of this discussion is. And there's ways to break that down, but we need technology transition plans. And as part and parcel of those plans, we need workforce transition plans. And that actually dovetails quite nicely with one of our new governor's proposals in his State of the State speech. Because we know with automation of vehicles and things of that nature, and automation of different industries like the warehouse and what goes on the docks and so on, we are going to have folks that are going to lose jobs. And so if we want social equity, we want environmental justice, we have to be able to address those issues. So I would ask that you put that on your list. And so please take a look at the video that you're doing, for those of you in Move LA, and create an outline that you can share back with the audience that was here today, and which can guide you as you move forward, hopefully with focus groups, working with the district, because the district's actively working on this, to refine a plan so that, this is going to be a bad pun, but what the heck, I'm not at the district anymore. So the air plan doesn't become a bunch of hot air. It needs to have the $1 billion. And we need to set about how to do it and do it properly. And it means everybody working together. And I, again, applaud Move LA for hosting this event and putting this front and center.
Great. Wow, thank you. And if you're looking for our plan, we can probably put it on screen, but it's on page 19 of the book. And you know, we love. I mean, as we go through, and I'll circle back around with folks. You know, I'd love to get, you know, sort of, hey, yeah, I like the endorsement for Move SoCal. Anybody else up here want to endorse the idea of Move SoCal? I know BizFed is like, hey, we're all SoCal. So, but you know, I think what is really interesting here is this opportunity to go to voters in 2020, possibly with a ballot initiative that we collect signatures on, and there's an opportunity where we may only need a 50+1% vote in this case. You know, for Measure M, it was 2/3, but that was because the agency itself was authorized by the state legislature and then put it on the ballot through a vote of their board. And that's a possibility through the Air Quality Management District Board. But there's also a possibility that we as Californians and Southern Californian start to collect signatures in communities and say, this is a public health crisis, and we can address it with this funding source. And we can get this done, and we can reach these incredible goals. And so there's still there's a couple of court cases that are going on right now. There was a tax that passed by 56% up in the Bay Area. It's gone to court. There's a real discussion right now whether or not there's actually a loophole in the way that that some of the initiatives after Prop 13, Prop 218 were written, where if we go directly to voters in a district, we might be able to do this with a 50+1 vote rather than the 2/3 threshold. So check that out. This kind of goes through it and walks through it and explains it. So now I want to I want to switch over to this side because I've been kind of heavy on this side, and talk with some of our utility folks over here, because I think they play a key and critical role, right? Because we can't transition to this new industry if we just don't literally have the power to do it. So Tanya is the Public Policy and Planning Manager for Southern California Gas. And, you know, I want you to kind of address not only, you know, some of the issues that have come up here, but what type of fueling infrastructure do we really need to deploy some of these technologies on scale, particularly in the heavy-duty sector, where a lot of these trucks are going very long distances. They don't have fixed routes, so they may go to Alabama and then to Florida, to Nevada, and then back here. What role can the gas company play in not only reducing climate emissions, but addressing air quality issues?
Great. Thanks, Eli. Is this on? Okay.
And if we do something crazy like this that go to voters, do you think we could get the support of your industry and others?
I'm not sure I'm going to
if you're allowed
to.
But, all right.
I will, and I have to compliment Move LA for getting together on a panel and of all of the voices on the zero versus near zero debate that Mary Nichols referred to. And I'm not sure we've ever all sat down in a room and spoken with each other. And I was thinking perhaps Move LA could reconvene this group and we could sit in a circle and actually talk about some of these issues. Because I fear that, you know, so we've heard about the urgency of both air quality and climate, and I'm not going to repeat all that, and the responsibility of heavy-duty trucks for 80% of the NOx emissions. And you know, when the ongoing some of the things that people have said that are very provocative and important. It's the dream big, smooth transitions, new technologies, don't pick winners and losers. If we're going to reach our goals sustainably, because if we don't think about what that transition is and how we can work together, it's just perpetuating keeping diesel trucks on the road, and we suffer from that on an air quality perspective and both climate. So specifically in terms of what, on the near zero side, Southern California Gas Company has been working. We helped develop, working with the Air District and others to develop a near zero heavy duty natural gas engine that's 90% cleaner than the current standard. So essentially from an emissions perspective, it's practically zero, and when running on renewable natural gas, it can even be negative. And so renewable natural gas is essentially methane that's been captured from organic sources. And so when that methane isn't emitted to atmosphere, you get a net climate benefit. And so SoCal Gas has, specifically what we've been doing, we have 16 public access CNG stations, and those stations can serve heavy-duty natural gas trucks. Pretty soon, all of those stations will be delivering renewable natural gas. And when that happens, because of the environmental credits, the price at the pump will actually be reduced by about 26 cents per gasoline gallon equivalent. So making that option, which provides immediate air quality benefits, even more affordable. We also have a truck lease program free of charge where customers can test out heavy-duty trucks on their actual routes to see how they perform, so they don't have to purchase a truck in advance of actually trying it out. We're also looking at what we can do to support zero tailpipe emission trucks. So specifically hydrogen fuel cell trucks, where the electricity is generated on board and there's the potential for longer routes and different duty cycles than a battery electric truck could serve. So we're looking at the feasibility of hydrogen pumps at our existing CNG stations. So that's part of the transition and part of how different technologies for different applications, and in working together, we can figure out how to have a smooth transition. And I think I'll stop there since we have a lot of people on the panel, but thank you to Move
Awesome,
LA.
great. Well, and it reminds me of when we went through this conversation about a dozen years ago when they came up with a big deal to convert a lot of the or reduce the pollution from the diesel trucks at the ports. And it was a big deal at the time. And then, and there was this turnover of trucks, and unfortunately, the result was that many of while the diesel engines were performing better at high speeds, at highway speeds, when they're actually at low speeds, under 10 miles, they were just as bad as before. And so communities that were there at the ports were still being impacted with heavy pollution. And so, it begs the question of, well, we've got technology, but are we there yet? And do we have the technology to be able to do this smooth transition to a clean economy? And so I want to reach out to John, way down there. We're getting closer, actually. President and Chief Executive Officer of Calstart, to talk about where are we with the technologies? Are all electric vehicles reliable enough for goods movement, and will they ever be? And what other technologies in terms of truck infrastructure and light, medium, and heavy duty can we be using to be able to achieve these air quality goals? And is it just regulations, or do we need incentives as well?
Okay, Eli, thank you very much. Great set of questions. Calstart is a not-for-profit organization focused on building the clean transportation technologies industry so that we can have healthy air and address the climate threat. We have about 200 member companies. They include all the major truck manufacturers: Kenworth, Peterbilt, Volvo, Daimler, Freightliner. They also include several large fleets, UPS, FedEx, and PepsiCo. We also have startups like Tesla, and they have a semi-truck. There's a company, I believe one of our members is here today, Thor Trucks, with a startup electric truck. Yeah. Very exciting area, and what we're really trying to do is from electric to biofuels to hydrogen, trying to hit the targets. By 2030, let's all have clean air. Let's address the climate threat, dramatically reduce the emissions. So there's a huge opportunity, and the good news is the technology is evolving very rapidly now. It's amazing what Cummins Westport has done to develop a natural gas engine that is 90% cleaner than the current diesel standard. It's amazing what battery prices have come down by like about 80% over the last decade. We expect them to halve by 2025 with current technology, and there could even be a step function where a new battery technology steps forward and we come down even faster and get better performance. Wow. The problem is diesel technology is really, really good. The engines last about 1 million miles. You can refill it everywhere in about 5 or 10 minutes. And the trucking industry knows that technology. The mechanics are there. They are embedded. They know how to work it. They don't want to change. So this is really where I think this whole effort is so important. Let's help provide the funding to facilitate this transition. I think there can be good regulation that can work in conjunction with the funding that we're talking about developing. But we need, the incentives really are critical, particularly when you get down to these smaller fleets, the owner-operators. They don't have the resources of the FedExes and the UPSs. They need assistance trying to make that transition. So that's a really important opportunity. And one thing I just want to say is when we talk about lining the pockets, I think we ought to just think about, and the way I view it is our organization started in the early 90s when there was an incredible downsizing of the defense and aerospace industry. We lost about 200,000 high-quality manufacturing jobs here in LA County because the Cold War had ended and President H.W. Bush said we don't need such a big defense department anymore. So that was a loss of manufacturing jobs, and our whole goal was to try to recreate manufacturing jobs. So we now have that. BYD, a large Chinese company, could have come anywhere in the United States. They chose North LA County. Proterra, a leading manufacturer of electric buses, decided to set up a facility in the city of industry. Thor Trucks is here. CCW is a company retrofitting old diesel trucks and building electric trucks out in Riverside. So there are lots of really good jobs, and when we think about where these incentives go, at least in part, those incentives would go to these local manufacturers, and we would be creating jobs here locally.
That's what we love to hear. Do you think your members can get behind an idea like this?
I think they would be very excited about this funding, and that it would really help to drive a lot of change. Okay. All right. So that sounds positive. I like that. I like that. And I think too that it's important that a lot of these jobs. I think Barry, made a really good point that we need to talk about workforce transition, and that it really needs to be targeted in communities that need this benefit the most. The communities that Marc works in, the communities that Quentin was talking about, and others have been talking about. Tracy had to run. Okay, all right. I was about to actually ask her, but we have Gerard. Gerard Wright, everybody. Gerard, woo! Oh, all right. Gerard used to work at Move LA.
My goodness, I didn't realize I had one.
Yeah.
I need to boost my social media account then right now.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so I wanted to, Gerard works for BizFed now, and you guys do represent some of these smaller businesses, some of the mechanics, and others like that, right? Mm-hmm. And, we're talking about a whole industry around diesel. And so, on the one hand, I want to know, what are your members going to revolt over something like this? And, in the past, BizFed has supported tax increases for transportation. Tracy was there at Measure R and Measure M with your massive grassroots alliance of businesses. I love that. So what could get you and the business community to the table on something like this?
Well, we're at the table now in this sense. We're trying to ask a number of questions on how this will be administered, and also this is something that if Tracy was here right now, the first question is the devil's going to be in the details. The first statement she would make was the devil's in the details of how will this program work, and how will it function in terms of financing, as well as the delivery of it, because David Grannis pointed out, we have Measure R, we have Measure M, we just fought hard to protect SB1 funds. What are we doing? And this is not a knock, but it's just the current sentiment right now is, what are we doing with the funds that we have in place right now in various areas, and actually can deliver on the projects that can provide those efficiencies? For example, in the trucking industry, if they can make, a trucker can make 3 turns at the port, that can improve the efficiency and reduce emissions by an enormous factor, because we've improved the throughput of our goods movement system. But we have to put the infrastructure in. That could just be just improving the interchanges. That could be even just widening sidewalks underneath the 710. I live in North Long Beach, and that's a perfect example of what we need to do with the monies we do have to increase that and improve that infrastructure. But we also have issue, or I wouldn't say issue, but just questions of how this would work out in terms of if there's certain areas in LA County and maybe even some in San Bernardino Riverside that are already past their 10% or 10-cent tax threshold. Will there be an equity imbalance there in terms of, will some areas benefit more from the funds, but they're not putting much of the sales tax into it? So there's questions that our members are having and are trying to wrap their heads around to figure out how this would work. Another factor is with the slippery slope, and this is coming from a couple key members, of now a regulatory body having sales tax authority, and will that set a precedent? And that is something that, again, you have to ask the questions to figure out how to make the connection to ask the right questions and also get the right feedback before you go to voters, if it's 50+1 or 2/3. In the case of Measure M, I work wearing a different hat when I was at the other side with Move LA, was working with the business community to ask, hey, what are the questions, what are the things we need to have in terms of accountability of the sales tax funds, have a solid list of projects, deliverables, what are those things look like before the business community can step in and take that lead? And I believe Hillary Norton, if she's still here, was leading that charge on that, because it was just asking those tough questions to get the right results so that they can then be delivered to the taxpayers, who are both employees and employers. So that's an important aspect that our members are asking, and it's just trying to wrap their heads around in relation to this piece. We'll be at the table, of course, because that's how we're going to get those questions answered and be able to ask more.
So, Gerard.
Yes.
So, what I'm not hearing is no how, no way.
Because we have a process. And much like BizFed did for Measure M, that was like a year-long process, and that took a lot of vetting, took a lot of questions, and a lot of back and forth before a decision was made. And BizFed was one of the last business organizations to support Measure M because they took that careful approach. So I think right now it's just asking the questions, be at the table to figure out how this all comes together, and that's the most important piece before you go to the voters, because you also have to look at, and I think polling is going to be very important too, of you got possibilities of Prop 13 with possibilities of different parcel taxes, different other parcel taxes on parks and libraries, even for fire and life safety. Those are all going to be on the ballot. Will that help it, or will it hurt it? We don't know. But those are questions, again, at the table at this point in time, March 2019, that we'll have time to ask a number of those questions and figure that out. And I think being at the table to ask the questions and get more information, I think, is important in this phase, in this process. And also looking at from an affordability perspective, given, as was talked about in other panels, the discrepancy of incomes and income inequality and all the poverty issues that are going on, that's an important factor as to looking at this all holistically. So we're at the table to, again, ask the questions like what was done in Measure M and Measure R to get more understanding, to get more feedback of how this would work. And by that point, I think it'll probably end up being June 2020 before BizFed comes to a decision on, hey, we're going to support this, or no, this may not happen. But again, it takes a conversation like this. So I want to thank Denny and Move LA for starting that conversation to get us thinking about it.
Great. Well, thank you, Gerard. I'm glad you're still on Team Move LA. I actually want to. I'm gonna go to Josh, and then I'll get you over here, Todd, and then Rory, you'll bring up the rear. But Josh, you're the manager for Air, Climate, and Transportation Electrification Policy. Boy, that's a mouthful. For SoCal Edison, you're one of these businesses. You're obviously in this space, and I'd love you to talk about a little bit what Edison is doing. But what role is your utility playing in access to this technology and ensuring that it isn't just something for, as Kevin DeLeon talked about, just for the wealthy? And how can utilities sort of streamline this process for rebates on zero-emission vehicles? Because right now, for passenger vehicles, and now we're talking about passenger vehicles a little bit, because while air quality is critical and it's a public health issue, when we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, 50% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions are coming from the transportation sector, and that's predominantly our passenger vehicles. And so right now, it's great. We have all these rebate programs where you can get a discount on your passenger vehicle, but you have to go through this process, get approved, get a waiver, then you only have 30 days to go and buy it. You seriously have to be committed. And that's not really going to work for all, the broader public. We're just talking about the 2.5 people who are sort of the early adopters who waited 24 hours in line for a new iPhone kind of people. We need something that works for a broader scope. So how are utilities addressing that or handling that?
There's a lot in that question, and I'm happy to address all of it. So thank you for having us. So in 2017, Edison released a white paper that we call the Clean Power and Electrification Pathway, and it looks at how can California meet both GHG reduction goals as well as air quality. And so, we believe that electrification can be an affordable, practical solution, not just in transportation, in all sectors of our economy. Specific to the transportation sector, we're doing an all-of-the-above approach. We're tackling all of the sectors. On the light duty space, we are very big proponents of point of sale, which is, the issue that you were addressing where, you've got multiple rebates. We have our own rebate. We offer $1,000 if you're an Edison customer for the purchase of either a new or used electric vehicle, which is different from state and federal incentives, which only apply to new. We're big proponents of point of sale where all that gets packaged together at the dealership, so the buyer doesn't have to deal with the hassle. We have a number of programs that fall on. We brand all of our transportation electrification programs as part of our Charge Ready suite of programs. So in addition to our Clean Fuel Rewards rebate, we have a rebate for people that want to install a level 2 charger at their home. They can get up to $1,500 to help offset the cost of installing that infrastructure. We have our Charge Ready Transport program for the commercial sector, for the medium and heavy duty sector. We, through the Charge Ready Transport program, we pay for the infrastructure to connect your charging equipment to the grid, and then we give you a rebate for the equipment. And we have special electric vehicle rates for commercial customers that remove demand charges for the first 5 years and then offer lower demand charges thereafter, because we're really looking at making it an affordable option for drivers, for fleet operators end to end. And then in terms of, this is an area that kind of helps everybody, both businesses and private sector. We have our Charge Ready 2 proposal, which is currently at the Public Utilities Commission, which is our application to install 48,000 public chargers, level 2 and DC fast chargers across Southern California, which will make it easier for any EV driver within our service territory to get access to charging. It'll benefit businesses that are looking to offer that as an amenity, as drivers can continue to vote with their pocketbooks, and purchase electric vehicles in greater numbers, you know, that's going to become a deciding factor for a business, whether or not a customer visits your shopping center or, you know, visits your offices. Is there access to a charger? And so similar to the Charge Ready Transport program, we install the connection to the grid. We pay for all that, which can be some of the most expensive part of installing charging infrastructure, and then we give you a rebate for the charger. So I'll stop there, but
Yeah.
we'll close out with one, you know, quick point that electric vehicle prices are coming down. You know, people always refer to the Tesla, but there's a huge market for used electric vehicles. You know, one of our nonprofit partners, Valley Clean Air Now, up in the San Joaquin Valley, you know, they have this great program where they connect people who have really, really old, high-polluting cars with cleaner, more efficient cars, and they're connecting them with used bolts, volts, leafs. You know, these are cars that are, you know, going for under $10,000. And even on the new side, you know, with rebates and incentives, you can get an electric vehicle for, you know, the mid-20s. So it's very much, you know, rapidly advancing technology. It's going through the adoption curve just like every other technology.
Yeah.
You know, 10 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. And now everybody has a smartphone, even, you know, communities, low-income communities. It's just the de facto device. So
Yeah.
we see electric vehicles going
Well,
that same trajectory.
And 10 years ago, there weren't any really commercially available electric cars either.
Correct.
So, no, I think you make a really critical point about that used market. You know, and our president, Marlene Grossman, was also the founder of Pacoima Beautiful. And we went out to Pacoima Beautiful and met with them a couple weeks ago. One of the things that they told us that was really sort of powerful for me to understand is, like, they're not, you're not going to see the adoption of electric vehicles until they can compete with the $500 or $1,000 car that they're selling at the dealership, the used dealership down the street. You know, and so it's good that it's coming down, but, you know, we really struggle with that. And also the access. I mean, most people in Los Angeles and LA County are renters, and those are particularly low-income folks. And so, you know, if they don't think that they're going to have a charger in their community ever, you know, they're never going to buy a car, electric vehicle. And so, you know, I think it's good that you're moving into that used space and the charging space, but how do we ensure that it's equitable but also available to everyone?
Real quick, one point on the multi-unit. I live in a multi-unit. A lot of times when we talk about people who live in multi-units having access to charging equipment, we kind of treat them like they're hostages at their home, and we forget that they go places.
Yeah.
So they go to school, they go to work,
Right.
you know, they go shopping, and those places will have chargers.
That's true. Yep. Good point, good point. All right, cool. So thank you, Josh. So Todd, Mr. Campbell, you got your hands in all kinds of interesting stuff. You know, you're the VP of Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs at Clean Energy, but you're also involved with a lot of environmental efforts. And, you know, wouldn't it be interesting, wouldn't it be great, you know, we talk about we have 10 or 12 years to get this done, but wouldn't it be great if we actually had a little bit more time? And one of the things we've been looking a lot at is, and Chair Nichols mentioned, was these short-lived climate pollutants. These are these really, really potent gases that are short-lived. They only are around for 25 years, but they're 100 times more impactful in terms of heating, the heat effect than greenhouse gas emissions. And so if we're able to actually capture some of them and use them in the duty cycle for renewable natural gas or for vehicles, we might give ourselves a little bit more time before we warm to the point where, well, we're SOL. And so I guess, you know, I'd love to hear from you, because you're in this industry. You know, where are we? Is there more capacity? How much infrastructure do we really need? And is this correct, or am I making something up here?
Well, I don't. This is fine. I don't think you're making anything up, Eli.
Okay.
But I.
By the way, my dad's a climate scientist, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, we need more.
Yeah,
to be honest
he
with
worked on the 4th climate assessment that just came out recently.
Really? Well,
yeah.
you know, this is a personal issue for me because I have children, like many of you out there, and you know, growing up in Southern California, when I was a child, I remember getting out of my pool and it wasn't my pool, actually, my grandparents' pool. We didn't have money for a pool, but when we got out, you'd have this burning lung sensation immediately, and you'd have to wait 30, 40, maybe minutes, maybe an hour before it went away. And I loved the pool, and I loved playing with my grandparents in the pool. And but we've come a long way, I believe, in terms of air quality. Certainly because of the leadership of someone sitting right next to me, to be quite honest. But we still have far to go. And there was one thing that you mentioned, Eli, in terms of the air pollution standards about, we only have till 2030. We actually only have till 2023 for the first deadline, which means we have to reduce our NOx emissions by 45%. And then I think the total by 2030 is, 60-something%? Somewhere around there. But that's a Herculean task. And when you consider that 2% of the vehicles on the road make up 40% of the NOx emissions from mobile sources, and that 2% are the heavy-duty trucks, that means we need to get going right now. And for all the wonderful things that Senate Bill 1 is doing in terms of giving us more funding to build our infrastructure, unfortunately, the California Truckers Association put in a clause that actually does not allow the Air Resources Board to regulate any new purchased truck or existing truck for up to 18 years. So that means that the district here, our South Coast Air Quality Management District, when it has to deal with mobile source pollution, which it really doesn't have much authority over, it could be creative by doing MOUs, it could, mobile source strategies, it does have authority, limited authority over public fleets through its fleet rules. But every diesel truck that's being purchased today has the ability to operate in California for at least 18 years, and we have nothing to say about it. The last 2 years have been banner years for diesel engine manufacturers. They are selling trucks left and right. And if you look at our SIP strategy, we are wholly dependent, not just on the fleets that stay here, but the fleets that are coming in that don't want to register in California and want to evade not only regulation but also taxes. So, putting my business hat on and off, and then my nonprofit, because I serve on the League of Conservation Voters, and I serve on the Coalition for Clean Air as a board member. We have a lot of work to do, and I want to thank Move LA first and foremost for bringing us all together, because we do need to sit down and we do need to talk. And if you saw some of the tweets between Adrian and I, you'd think we'd be worst enemies sometimes, because he's doing what he should be doing. He is, with Earth Justice, fighting for zero. If you're an environmentalist, and I was formerly, with the Coalition for Clean Air and NRDC, you need to fight for zero. You have to, because that is the end point. For me, I want to make sure that no one gets left behind. So if there's not a zero emission application available, it can't be a diesel. It can't be a diesel where the selective catalytic reduction system doesn't work at low speeds in the ports, and you have 10 times the emissions of the actual certification, 10 times above what they're supposed to be hitting. So, I totally, on the one hand, we fail to meet the standards in 2023. We lose $6 to $8 billion in terms of transportation funds with the federal government. We potentially lose federal control, and also the offset requirements that Barry mentioned go into play. But even more importantly, the thing that's not being mentioned is the thing that Marc mentioned, is the $56 billion that we're spending on medical-related actions to abate the pollution that we're living in. So that's the urgency. It's not a debate between zero and near zero. It's a debate of, can we get these clean trucks that reduce at least 90% emissions on the road, when they're on the road? Can we get the low-income driver that's maybe making $28,000 a year into these trucks? Can we get them into a zero-emission truck? How are we going to do that? How are we going to be able, no matter, and I agree with you, Barry, one size doesn't fit all. So we're going to need all these strategies. How are we going to get them out of a minimal compliant truck? Because let's also talk about business. If you're a business and you're down at the ports and you're trying to get the contract, you need to be the lowest cost vendor if you get the contract.
Right.
So how do we get or persuade someone to do something different that they're not used to, out of a diesel and into something new that's not as well tested potentially, but I think, some technologies are further than others. How do we get them into that, and how do we make that the business model here in LA? That's what we're going to need to do. In terms of our business, and what you're talking about with short-lived climate pollutants, yes, we are investing in producing renewable gas that is a negative 250 carbon intensity level under the low carbon fuel standard, where diesels are at 91, 92 carbon intensity level. So it's almost a 350 carbon intensity difference. And the key there is that I don't need to wait for the grid. I don't need to wait, in terms of, 2045. I don't need to wonder if I have long range or whatnot. The near zero trucks that are being powered by the renewable gas are delivering a significant and substantial reduction in carbon right now. There's fueling infrastructure available right now, and they're reducing NOx emissions on the certification side 90%, but with Riverside tested it, the in-use emissions were much better. And in fact, so much better that the manufacturer is talking about, well, what if we certify even to a lower standard? And that's something that's really important for advocates, I think, like Adrian, who could say, hey, maybe we can do better, even though it's not a zero engine, but maybe we can have a better near zero truck. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention. We need to be very careful about what we mean by near zero.
Okay.
We need, well, yeah, and if you do a full life cycle assessment, we are. Because if you do a full life cycle assessment for even an electric truck, you need to look at the power plant pollution and how that stuff is processed and where that fuel is coming from. So I actually totally agree with you. We need a zero equivalent strategy. And what I was going to say was, it's going to be really important for us to define the near zero standard in this effort, because the federal government has decided they want to develop a low NOx engine rule too. And my understanding is it's not going to be the 90% reduction level. It may actually be maybe 50% if you're lucky, maybe even higher than that. So if we're going to put money into trucks, they need to be the cleanest available technologies, and we need to be open-minded enough to make sure that our businesses can operate at the same time, because if they can't get into trucks that don't operate, we're not going to succeed no matter how much money we have. And by the way, it's going to take time to electrify or get to zero-emission fueling. We've been in this business since 1997. I think that, we approached Dr. Wallerstein and staff when they were first developing the fleet rules. We are a very tiny percentage of all the trucks on the road, and we have a technology that's available now. So we need to get around in this table. We need to be able to work on ways to get drivers out of diesel trucks right now and into trucks that will save us not only in terms of climate pollution by 2030, but also get to our healthful air standards by 2023. So we got 4 years. It's the time of high school.
Oh, jeez.
All right, no pressure.
Hey, all of our best years,
by the way,
right?
when we poll people up and down the state in terms of do they think they're in a clean air environment, a lot of people are starting to think, because they see blue skies above,
Right.
They do.
Yeah.
And that's scary. The only sector that knew that they had a problem out of up and down the state was LA. I'm so proud of us, because we figured it out. So we know we have a problem.
So, and it's interesting that you bring up polling, because the Air District actually did a poll about a month ago. They came out with the results, and they asked specifically, would voters in the Air District, that includes Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside, would they support a half-cent sales tax to support air quality measures? And 61% said that they would. And this was, they wrote what the potential language was. So, it obviously was higher in Los Angeles County, but, there is still an understanding that we have bad air quality and toxic air is impacting students and kids and children and the communities that we live in. But you're right, the blue skies definitely don't help. So talking about bringing people around big issues, strategies between business and the environment, and climate issues, and bringing people around tables. I know you guys, this is Rory over here, by the way, you guys. He's with the LA Business Council. You have your sustainability summit coming up, subtle plug. You should all go to that next. I don't know when the date is, but we're an in-kind partner, so we're going to be promoting that. But, maybe there's an opportunity with the Business Council to bring together the folks around this table and put them around a table and have a conversation. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
To support something like this, to this Move SoCal 4-county idea.
Sure. So, of course, folks in the business community see that it's extremely important to put in infrastructure that's going to improve lives across the board, right? So the LA Business Council supported Measure R in 2008 and Measure M in 2016. Both sales tax increases. It is also important to look and see what folks across the Air District are going to be willing to support. Are we willing to put in another half-cent sales tax? That's something we need to ask ourselves. And I think everyone across this panel is very important in that, right? So it's good to bring everyone together on this issue. This is a huge and important task that we're facing, right? Climate change can bring down 10% of our GDP by the middle to the end of this century if we don't act.
Wow.
That's huge, okay? So we're going to need to bring people that are in regulatory positions, that are in public health, that look in the business community, that are in the environmental justice community, all together at the table and ask ourselves, how are we going to be able to go ahead and build the infrastructure that's going to get us to that clean economy that we are already locked into by 2045. We know where we need to go from the electricity side, right? How are we going to be able to push so that we have climate impacts and we lower our air pollution impacts so that we can be able to build our GDP and our economy into the future and be leaders here in California? And, it's very possible that something like this is the way forward. So I think it's very important that we all, again, come together and discuss how it's going to be most beneficial for everyone involved so we can move forward equitably with this.
Awesome. Thank you, Rory. We have Alex here from the Metrolink, so I wanted to see if you wanted to just summarize any of the remarks that Stephanie made, and yeah.
Thank you, and thank you again to Move LA for convening this really important conversation, and we're happy that we can be a part of it. And I appreciated the reference and imagery of us facing our high school years, and I think that Metrolink, as part of our transit ecosystem, part of that conversation on pulling cars off of the road, we're glad that we can be a part of that solution now, and we're glad that we can be a part of what we've now seen as a shared vision. It's not just Metrolink's vision anymore. It's shared among us stakeholders and amongst communities. I want to also share a quick statistic that, when we're talking about lifting all of our communities, most of our stations are within disadvantaged communities. We serve 6 counties. We are a voice for the region, and I know on behalf of Stephanie and our agency, we're glad that we can be a part of that conversation. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, so I've learned a couple of things. First of all, I didn't really sleep that much this week because obviously I was preparing for this, but I also have 3 young children who didn't sleep either. But it sounds like I can't sleep anymore because we've got basically 4 years to get this done. So nobody in this room is allowed to sleep once they leave. The other interesting thing is, we debated back or talked a little bit about zero, near zero, but what I thought was interesting what Chair Nichols said, which was we actually need to get beyond zero, that after 2050, we actually have to be taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And so, maybe that's a way for us to kind of come together. And, I love the plug for more public transportation. We need a lot more of that. We need to be investing in that. And, you know, I really think that it's clear that, you know, obviously regulation is critical, and regulating first is necessary, but it's sure obvious that incentives are needed ASAP, and that we really need to build up our incentive structure, and that we need, as Barry said, $1 billion, or this whole thing starts to fall apart. So a lot to think about here, a lot to process. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything else. I know we're at 3, so I pulled us back, you know, by a little bit, so we're not running that late. So I want to get everybody out of here so we don't hit too much traffic. I'm sure it's already that bad. But we're all taking public transportation, so it's okay.
I'll throw something out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just as this conversation moves forward, it's important to get actual frontline communities as part of the conversation, because I think too often, and not always coming across in a genuine way, I think our communities are used as shields against moving to zero emissions, right? Whether it's talking about too many of us live in multi-unit dwellings, or, you know, too many of us are independent truck drivers. If you're concerned about those issues, then we also want to see you come down and support misclassified drivers, right? So then they can collectively bargain with their company, and the companies should take on the responsibility, not these drivers, right? So I think it's tough to hear folks utilize, and it's not just here, I've heard in other places as well, to varying degrees of genuine concern. The actual communities need to be engaged in these conversations.
Thank you. No, well said. Thank you. And I'm glad you said it. Excellent. All right. Well, I thank you all for bearing with me and staying till the bitter end. And I hope you all had a great day. And we're looking forward to hosting you at our 11th annual transportation conversation. Thank you.